Welcome to Law Society Younger Members Committee Career Information Session number 3. Jennifer Dorgan talks to Rowena Hennigan about working successfully from home.
I'll just introduce Rowena briefly. So Rowena is remotely based lecturer, speaker, education specialist and project consultant. She started working remotely in 2007 and since 2016 she has been 100% remote, based in Spain and working for clients internationally. So we're thrilled to have her with us today for our information session on successfully working from home. Rowena, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Jennifer. Lovely to be here.
Good, thank you. I suppose, as you're aware, and as we were just chatting about there, COVID has brought about a whole new cohort of people who have all of a sudden found themselves working from home. These are probably people who have been in and out of the office, talking to their colleagues every day, going for coffee, going for lunch. I suppose they now find themselves in a whole new realm. What do you have to say, I suppose, about people looking after themselves while they work from home?
Well, the thing is that all the research shows, and from the fully established remote companies, and there's quite a few of them, the ones that have been around since about 2005, you might know some of the names: Automatic, GitHub, GitLab, Shopify in Ireland have 450 workers fully remote. They're fully remote in Ireland. They've known for a long while that rest is and work-life balance is as important as when you sit down at the machine, because you're not in the same physical room with your colleagues. Mm-hmm. You don't commute. You don't have those little opportunities to grab a coffee, to walk to the meeting room, to go to the gym. The water cooler moments, as they're called, where you end up chatting for 20 minutes in the hall at a printer or whatever. So when these companies started around 2005 establishing their policies, practices and operations, they were so intentional about rest and about the balance needed, because it's a known issue, a known challenge in the world of remote work, that when you're on your own working, you may work too many hours, you may spend too long at the machine. So from a health and wellness perspective, that's really important, but we've got lots of good guidance there from the established companies who I would have interviewed, researched as part of my work. So also, it's really important to point out, and I say it on all of these sessions because I have to remind myself some days as well, that we are in the middle of an emergency situation of working from home. As you mentioned, Jennifer, there, it's not normal remote work. You're restricted in movements. You may have personal issues going on. You may have local restrictions going on. So the levels of anxiety, the levels of stress are high as well, because of this forced potential situation you're in your little bubble, in your home working bubble. And of course, on top of that, you may have personal situation like you've got personal responsibility with children or for caring for someone. So we have to take all of this into account. So it's an extreme situation, and I constantly remind people of that, so that when they're checking in with themselves and going, I'm tired, I'm fatigued, I'm lacking motivation, whatever comes up, that's totally normal given the situation at the moment.
Okay. So how important is self-care at the moment, Rowena?
It's vital. Self-care is vital. And it's something that you need to also have a little bit of self-awareness about how you are with self-care. Now, obviously, when we're overwhelmed, when we're fatigued, we may forget self-care. It's natural. But what helps you when you have a good day, when you have a good week, when you look back through your week and see that your energy levels have been okay, and you notice maybe that you went out for a walk before you started work in the morning, that you did a half an hour of stretching, that you sat and listened to a podcast in the garden, whatever it may be, moving on to breaks, making time for social connections. So we all have a certain level of self-awareness, and like, for example, I need to schedule that in, Jennifer. When I get into a piece of research or piece of work, I can just go into the rabbit hole, okay? But I know, I'm sure people listening can identify to that with that. So I have to be quite self-disciplined and schedule in. And I do that by scheduling the lunch with a friend, scheduling the Pilates class online, blocking time in my calendar where I know I'm going to do a particular thing or take a break or whatever. And that's for me, but everyone needs to do their own little checkpoint there on how they're managing their own self-care and what works for them.
Okay.
In particular.
What risks are people running if they don't manage their self-care? Have you seen any particular, I suppose, health issues that have come before the last few months?
Yeah, so the Mental Health First Aid Ireland came out with research in June saying people were experiencing fatigue, trouble sleeping, that their work-life boundaries, about 40% of respondents as well, were blurred, right? Which means that people were not able to differentiate and disconnect in the evenings. And again, all of these things, we didn't know back in March how this was going to pan out. So if this had been for 3 or 6 months, but we know now it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. So we all need to stop and say, what am I doing day to day, week to week? Because I know that I will get fatigued, I could burn out, or also my basic productivity. I mean, how many people watching have sat and tried to find that attention at the computer? Or you've struggled and you're not there. And maybe you've gone for a walk or done something and you've realized when you come back, you do what you needed to do in 15, 20 minutes. But the nature of screens, Jennifer, the nature of technology, also really important to know that it sucks us in a bit and we tend to sit there and we can be a bit lethargic rather than having that, I need to get up, I need to get away from the machine to actually then come back and be productive. So that would be, that would be one of my biggest recommendations, that you look at time away completely, time away switched off from the computer.
I suppose that feeds into this much discussed right to disconnect.
It does.
Have you come across this a lot in the last few months? There's been a lot of in the media
and even here in Spain, we've just had some legislation that's passing through as well that's beginning to look at that. Obviously, some people listening might know more about this in particular than me. France is one of the leaders in terms of that right to disconnect and not answering emails and messages with certain hours. But interestingly, whatever happens legally, I think on an individual and a company level, core working hours and availability has been one of the things that's come up a lot. And the ability using technology, yes, you can be online, but you don't have to be there the whole time. And having a more informal arrangement, maybe a simple exchange of a paragraph of details with your team or with your manager to say, this is the way I would like to work. I will do my 35, 40 hours like this, whatever it is. And within reason as well, then that you are available for core working or core calls, as it would be. In terms of panning out that right to disconnect into reality today, there is something called remote team charters or remote team communication charters, and they can be on a team level and they can be on an individual level. And I'm talking a one-page type of charter where it simply says, and I've seen it coming through in some HR policies as well, where it simply says core hours are X, you will be available here, to check in you will do this. And there is not the expectation that you're sat there 9 to 5 looking at your email. So that's, of course, the ideal. We do have the flip side, Jennifer, where there in individual cases, because of the lack of trust, there may be more monitoring that goes on, officially or unofficially, whatever may happen. But in the established remote work world, where workers are given the autonomy to be productive in their own flexible working, and that's why it's called remote flexible working, there isn't that type of surveillance or monitoring. And in general, all the research, all the reports coming out from this 6 months, that show, like I said, from Mental Health First Aid, the Psychological Society of Ireland, that there are challenges. In the main, productivity has been maintained.
Okay.
So business, from a business perspective, productivity has been maintained. And and we'll go through it in a second, people are enjoying, to an extent, working from home, and they're finding they can be productive. And that's what seems to be coming through in some of the research. But maybe be a good point, since I've got the control for the polls, to launch this for the people that are, I've got a little poll here just to keep it interactive as well. And I've just launched it there because I'd like to do a little test and see what's going on in terms of how they feel about it. Okay. And that poll is simply, do you like working from home? Okay. Do you like working?
Just picking up on something you said there briefly, Rowena. Trust, peer support, trust in your colleagues, more important than ever when you're working from home?
So important. So important. But when we talk about trust in remote working, we put it with another word. So trust has come up a lot in terms of psychological safety and the psychology of supporting remote work. But in the established remote work world, trust and transparency is often the two terms you see together. And if I could answer on this session, other than the obvious of, if you display trust in your behavior, Jennifer, then you'll often, majority of the time, get trust back. That's a lot of what the psychology and the research says. But if I could try and summarize how to foster trust, it's quite difficult to get it into a nutshell. But if you put trust and transparency together, which might be of interest to people, it's when you're really proactively intentional in your communication. So let me give you an example of that. That could be what I just, the earlier scenario of, I'm going to be working from home for another 3 months. I want to set up norms and expectations with my manager and with my team. So I'm going to make a one-page document that says, here are my core working hours. Here's how I'll be available. These are the way, I'll answer emails, I'll do this. And then the next layer of that is how you will actually work and collaborate with me. My preference is video calls. My preference is that we do X, Y, and Z. And if you do that and also discuss it and agree it with your team openly on a call like this, often magic can happen, because within that detail is the sort of how we're going to be transparent with each other. So if that makes sense, so how we're going to be really explicit. So we can trust each other, but we have to set up the terms of that trust, okay? And the details.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? So I'm trying to explain it. Like, we say trust and transparency would be, I'll be really transparent, and this is exactly what I'm going to do for this webinar, Jennifer, and list the details, for example.
How are your poll results coming along?
Let's have a look. Sorry, I'll just pop on the glasses there. Okay, mixed bag. So we have, I don't know if I end the poll, I'll be able to show it. So I'm going to just do a quick screen grab here so I don't lose it in case, and I can do some whizzy jig. That's me doing the screen grab in case I lose it. Yes, do you like working from home? Yes, 26%. No, 26% split. Mixed feelings, 42%, and not sure, 5%. Okay, so
yeah. I can't vote, but I'd be in the mixed feelings category. I'm not 100% sure how I feel about it myself. I think it's my productivity that where I just question it when I'm at home. I find myself putting on the dishwasher, or running outside, taking the washing, but these kind of just little kind of house jobs while I'm there, and I do wonder if my productivity is down. Do you have any tips or tricks on how to structure your day, or get more out of your day while working from home?
Well, I already mentioned in terms of that self-care, the rituals. Okay. Yeah. And I also suggested, I'm just going to share the results there so people can have a wee look at them. But I also mentioned about scheduling. Okay. And scheduling is so important. Okay. Scheduling is so important. So within that scheduling, again, within that self-discipline, you need to block times off, Jennifer. So it's interesting that you say, well, I'll be emptying the dishwasher, right? If you know that that sort of distracts you on a Monday, my recommendation to you would be do it on a Sunday night. So that when you're coming into work, yeah, but you know what I mean, that when you're coming in, that you're not doing, you're not trying to do the housework. Now, within reason, if you break to empty the dishwasher after a period of deep work, and this is down to just self-discipline and best practice, right? And there's lots and lots of blog posts out there. I've done some blogs on my side about productivity, but it's horses for courses in terms of productivity, right? Some people find they can use timers on their phone, for example, or a clock timer where they do 20 minutes of an intense task and then they go and get a cup of coffee. Do you see what I mean? Or break it down. Now, to do that, you have to be good at breaking down the tasks that you have in a day into categories. And there's something called the Eisenhower Matrix, which some of you might have heard of, which is basically about what's urgent, what's not important. Because we probably, need to be a bit more intentional in that planning. So what I would suggest to you, other than the obvious of doing the dishwasher on a Sunday, is just do planning at the start of the day. Have you got 15 minutes in your calendar, right, where you look at the list for the day and you go, that stuff that'll take an hour of deep concentration, answering emails will take me half an hour, etc., etc., and break it down and then build into the day how you're going to do it, right? Calls and everything allowed. So that's one simple way of doing it. But again, the more you do it, so I've been doing this for so long, and I'm still a pen and paper girl, by the way. I don't do it on the computer. I often go off with my notebook and I have my props, my handy post-its here, my lightly coloured post-its, and I go off and I prioritize, I make my list, and then if there's something that I tend to avoid, like say for example accounting, Jennifer, just for example, right, I'll actually do the accounting and stick it on the post-it here, because writing it down acknowledges that avoidance technique that I'm very good at, and highlights it. So does that help, like that planning at the start of the day, acknowledging that, if you need to empty the dishwasher to be productive, empty the dishwasher, but like the other thing would be within reason in breaks. So empty the dishwasher when you've done a chunk of work throughout the day. So hopefully that will help. But I'm interested to know a little bit more, because you said, which I thought was interesting, that you don't feel you're productive at home. And is that because you get distracted?
I think so. And I suppose one on kind of my to-do list at the moment is to set up a proper home office. At the moment I'm working from the kitchen. I think that very much feeds into just feeling like I'm at home, like I'm not at work, like I'm not working properly. So, I mean, is that something you come across, that where you are in your home?
Yeah, it's really important where you are. Now, you're probably wondering where I am, and I'm doing the session at 8:00 at night in Spain from a particular location on purpose. And that's because I spent 4 months in full lockdown in a very small apartment that wasn't designed. We just moved because my husband and I were remote workers, and we work mainly from co-working. We've always done. We've mixed it up a little bit. And for me, with a small child, getting out of the house was really important.
Yeah.
Yes, workspace is really important, Jennifer, and that's something. My work with Spectrum Life and Leia Healthcare, that's something that workspace analysis, or for want of a better word, or discussing where someone is working, there's often key links between, for example, you being in the kitchen means you can see the dishwasher.
Yeah.
You want to empty it. So, as you said yourself, setting up the new workspace and closing the door to the new workspace may stop that urge in its tracks. But yeah, I guess where you work, the proper setup, and then again noticing what's bugging you. It's interesting because you noticed that that's bugging you. When we notice something's bugging us, write it down or talk to someone about it, okay? When we notice if there's something bugging us about productivity in relation to where we're working or how we're working, mention it to a colleague, reach out, or write it down and let it sit with yourself on a piece of paper, in a journal, on a post-it if that works, because that's what, that's how we begin to process it psychologically, and how we begin to notice maybe things we can do to help. I think there's a couple of questions that have come in.
A few questions came in there. I just picked up one. Do you have any productivity apps or tools that you use or could recommend, to help with the productivity?
So the first thing, no water cooler. I'm sorry, I'm laughing at no water cooler equals dishwasher. I like that. Okay. So I don't okay, there are productivity tools, there are apps, right? And I'm not going to, I am just going to recommend it because I can't even think of one off the top of my head, but I know they exist. They put timers on your desktop, they give you these little star rewards when you've done things, right? But you need to understand what is your driver before you go down that road, okay? So when I mean by drivers or motivation, okay, so what is your driver or motivation? So I've written that down, okay? So over the next few days, the person who's asked that, notice what you get a buzz out of, all right? Notice how you feel productive, how you feel when you've achieved, and what you're looking for from that. Now, so do you look for peer acknowledgement? Do you look to treat yourself to go for a nice glass of wine? Do you look for a long bath to celebrate a project or a report being done? Whatever is your thing that works to motivate you and productivity wise, that's something you need to tap into and visualize, okay, before you make the plan. So follow the other guidance as well. Plan your day, know when you've got to do the couple of things, and then maybe use timers, right? And track your timers. Now, so what do I mean by that? I'm a bit of a nerd in this respect, and I just use a timer on my phone. For example, when I'm writing up content for the university, for TU Dublin, when I'm writing up some content and slide decks for a particular part of the module I work on, I will time myself, it's a bit nerdy, and how long that takes, and keep a note of it. And I have a spreadsheet which has an estimate of what time it takes, so that when I do go to do the next piece, right, I'm trying to be a little bit better and quicker at how I do it. What's the other reason for that? Once you plant that seed, you start to get better at preparing and noticing the content you might need for that tool. So that would be one of the ways to understand your driver. But again, I come back to self-care, and it's the common theme, right? If you're sitting there struggling to be productive, get up from the machine, right? How many of you have noticed when you're trying to figure something out, you go to the gym, you go for a walk, and you suddenly get the answer? I'm hoping some of you agree with me, that when you come away and you switch off, you find a better way or a better way of thinking about it. So I hope that answers. You can Google productivity tools. I have one, I'd see if I can find it. There is one game using physical marbles related to productivity that's really interesting. I might pop that on an email to you afterwards, because I probably won't be able to find it live now, Jennifer. But it's using marbles in a game-like fashion to motivate you to be productive. Okay. All right. Another question on the disconnect from work and study, right? So on this, you need to put the computer away. Lock it away if you have to, out of sight, out of mind. First piece of advice. Same with devices. If you're prone to picking up the device, checking emails, being online, and we need to be conscious of cumulative hours online here as well, because we might be on a laptop, on a tablet, on a mobile, lock them away. I have a cupboard in my house. They go in at night and I close the door. I can't see them. A lot of nights I don't bring my laptop home anyways from the co-working, but that's when I was working from home. I used to put them in a box and I'll put them out of sight. Notifications off, Okay, so turn notifications off. And Jennifer, to tie into an earlier point, you hopefully have set the expectations with your colleagues that your notifications will be off. And for example, unless it's exceptional, you don't work weekends, you don't work evenings. You're not online unless it's exceptional at 10 o'clock at night, for example. So if you do that in that little agreement in terms of home working, you are perfectly fine to turn off everything, turn off notifications, put them away. Again, check in with yourself. If you're weak, if you need support, maybe get a separate device for work. That's another recommendation that people often find better, or a separate mobile, separate laptop. And I'm back to the same piece of advice. Reach out. If it's bugging you, say it to a mate. Reach out to a colleague and just say, I'm feeling overwhelmed with too much technology. I need a detox. Are you going to help me do that? Can you help me? Let's do it together, or whatever. Okay, just support each other. Okay, great questions coming in here, Jennifer. Will I keep going, Jennifer, or do you want to moderate?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Been working from around 4 to 6 months now. Will it feel different as time goes on? Well, I'll tell you what, Jennifer made a really interesting point there. Jennifer's moving and creating her little home office space, right? She's moving it up, she's moving around. It can feel different if you move around, actually. That's one of the pieces of advice. As restrictions maybe lift, could you work an afternoon in a cafe? Could you go to a mate or a member of family that you can social distance with, or that you're within that social bubble? Could you change up where you're working internally? Could you add in more self-care? It will look different and become more sustainable if you do those proactive things within it. And if you're open-minded to where and how you work well within remote working. So hopefully that answers that question. I am starting a new job in 2 weeks remotely. Have you any tips for people on board into a firm in this manner? There are loads of articles out there on this, right? I've just onboarded a team, a virtual team, for a big tech company, and they'd never met any of them in person. There's lots of articles out there. I'm going to see if I can find a couple to share with you, but I would have a look at these companies, okay, to find they're fully remote companies. Look at their blogs, because what I'll be doing, Doist and GitLab. So you will find, if you search in their blogs, virtual onboarding, team onboarding remotely, they have lots of good advice on there. Okay, so hopefully that helps. Onboarding remotely is a whole, like, there's specialists in the area. If you're on LinkedIn, that girl who's asked me that, if you ping me on there, I'll connect you with a couple of people who post regularly on this as well. So you'll find me, Rowena Hennigan, on LinkedIn, and they do some really good content on remote onboarding. So hopefully that'll answer that. Any more questions?
Rowena, how do you make a case for if you have a boss who's quite old school and they expect you in the office every day despite lockdown rules, or, you know, lockdown rules aside? How do you make a case to your boss to show that, you know, this is the way forward if working from home works for you?
Well, it's interesting. So I'm going to answer that in two parts. So I do have some resources I can point you to. I do have some of it's out of America, but there's a return on investment for transitioning people to teleworking. That's what they call it in the States. And it's actually often a big ROI for companies if they do it. They save on office space, they save, etc., right? So I'll do that in the second part. But the first part is, when we did our first poll, actually, Jennifer, people said they wanted the mixed model. Okay, so the mixed model is called hybrid, or mixed model, in terms of maybe a couple of days in the office, maybe a couple of days at home. So what I would suggest to anyone who's, if you know, and normally you're asking that question because you know there might be a little bit of resistance, because if it was easy, you'd probably have that arrangement or some sort of arrangement, no problem. So if it's looking like it could be challenging due to the culture of the company or whatever, look at the hybrid model first, softly. Look at 3 months where you maybe do 1 or 2 days a week at home, okay, if that's possible. Now, that should be totally fine in these this current circumstances, regardless of what happens. So that would be my first piece of advice, because that builds the trust between the parties. So hopefully you understand what I'm saying. So if someone's nervous about that, you will show them by that 6 months period where you work the hybrid model. Then if you want to work to more of that, obviously you have a better stand to go back in and pitch, okay, and say, look, I want to go fully remote. So in Ireland, because we're all fabulous and fantastic, says her in Spain, right? There is an amazing organisation, community organisation called Grow Remote. Hopefully some of you have heard of them, growremote.ie. They're international now. They were started out of the West, out of two founders out of the West of Ireland, because the West is best. I have to get that in. And they are all about promoting remote work. And on their website, you will find templates and documents about how to put together a business case for remote working. Okay, so that's the first place I'm going to send people. They've also got local community meetups and sessions that happen online and in person if it's allowed. And then the second place I'm going to send you is to Global Workplace Analytics. And if you just put into Google Kate Lister, she's one of the leading people in the world in this space. On her site, she has the return on investment calculator for teleworking. So that has the content you need to build the business case as well, if you haven't found what you need from the Grow Remote site. And there's quite a few different downloadables and information on there.
Okay. Unfortunately, Rowena, I think we're actually out of time. Have any other questions come in that you just want to address, or is there anything?
I'm just going to see if I missed anything.
Yeah.
I can't see the second poll appearing in a minute. But that seems to be missed off of here. It's not loaded. Someone had asked about doing another poll, which we had planned to, by the way, but I don't seem to be able to find it on the system. I don't think I've missed any questions. Disconnecting, you asked about doing the other poll. You can see the professional wellbeing charter on the Law Society, which Michelle has put in there. Okay, and Michelle Nolan, I will send the onboarding, a couple of articles on onboarding and a couple of names that people can follow on LinkedIn as well for the onboarding, Michelle. So I think I've gotten that. I don't think I've missed anything. Trying to be conscious.
Rowena, thank you so much for joining us this evening. It was really, really great, really informative, and